everybody, this is Standing for Truth. This is going to be a short video with some really good news. Some solid data has come out today. Dr. Nathaniel Jensen has published 2 peer-reviewed papers on molecular clocks, specifically on the human Y chromosome and the genetic signal regarding the history of civilization. If anybody has watched my most recent debate with T-Jump, where I discussed some of these very same predictions, the debate title was, "Does creation make testable predictions?" Now, I gave him evidence for confirmed predictions in the past regarding genetics, astronomy, flood geology, but just most recently, Dr. Nathaniel Jensen has put in print very solid predictions regarding genetics. More specifically, the genetic signal found in DNA. These papers that have been put out today that are peer-reviewed are papers that I told T-Jump in our debate would be out soon with fulfilled predictions, and that very thing is what these papers prove. Now, the title of one of these papers is "Testing the Predictions of the Young Earth Y Chromosome Molecular Clock. Population growth curves confirm the recent origin of human Y chromosome differences." These papers are huge. Read them both, because this just goes to show how dead evolutionism really is. Creationists are the ones making future testable predictions. These predictions are both repeatable and falsifiable. And now, here are a couple of clips from my debate with T-Jump.
And he's looking for specific criteria to differentiate between what is imaginary and what is real. And this is going to be determined by evidence. This is how we can distinguish between what is imaginary and what is real, as he stated. Do we make novel predictions? The answer is yes. And he states that there are infinitely many ways of explaining anything. Right? You can post hoc, ad hoc, reason almost anything. So Tom here wants testable predictions that only future observations can prove to be either true or false. So no post hoc and no ad hoc. Anybody can predict the sun would come up. I agree with that. So if I get into things like there exists massive geological evidence that demonstrates sufficiently that the Earth's layers and rocks are young, fast erosion rates, worldwide sedimentary strata deposition, pancake-layered rock strata, cold rock slabs deep in Earth's mantle, indicating a worldwide global flood. These things he may accuse me of as post hoc and ad hoc reasoning. So let's get right into it then. Let's satisfy his criteria. Now, there exists so much evidence for biblical creation, especially in genetics. That's why we can utilize so many different fields of science and make predictions that are testable. Genetics is where the war is won today. And this is because traits are inherited, not bones found in the dirt. The term genetics, for example, wasn't even around during Darwin's day. This is how primitive Darwin's understanding would have been. But this is what's inherited in sperm and egg. Sperm and egg don't pass on a fossil. They pass on an instruction manual, an information system. If we want to find the history of humanity and the origin of species and look at the biblical base model, we need to look at DNA. Evolutionists need to look at DNA as well. We have in all of our cells, for the most part, DNA. And every generation, sperm and egg cell pass on DNA. As we know, and I'm sure Tom here is not going to dispute, DNA changes. There are mistakes that occur. This is a regular process, and therefore we have a clock. All we need is a regular repeating process. In the case of genetics, every generation changes happen, as I've stated. This is basic. Now, if we add up this over, let's say, several generations, there's a history that's then recorded. And because of this, we can look at people around the globe, animals, species around the globe, for example. How many differences exist, DNA differences, that is? For example, how fast does the DNA change and mutate? We literally have a clock in which we can use calculations to test whether or not we humans look young. Do we have an abundance of genetic differences? Has the clock been ticking for a lengthy time or a short time, as creationists would predict? And what we actually see in our DNA is amazing evidence suggesting that we have not been around for millions of years or even hundreds of thousands of years. Why? There's too few DNA differences, and we can make novel, testable predictions based on this data. And we have. It looks like we arose genetically just 6,000 years ago. This is shocking to most people, but this is science. And so we see one of the main arguments against creation is creationists can't make predictions that are testable. This is 100% false. We have and do meet the gold standard of science. We are the ones making the predictions. How do we respond when evolutionists such as Tom Jump tell us creationists, we can't make testable prediction? Well, this question can be answered in a number of successful ways. Many creationists have put in print testable novel predictions, claims about the natural world from which we do not yet know the answer, claims about the rate at which DNA mutates, predictions on the rates at which species form. There are numerous predictions, literal predictions. And what evolutionists are constantly asking for, they're asking for claims that future observations could reveal to either be true or false. And we've made these. One of the claims made by creation scientists, specifically Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, that have been put into print is, hey, look, here's a claim for humans. For example, take African people groups. Nobody has yet measured a particular type of rate that certain DNA mutates in African people groups. There are numbers, yes, literal numbers that says, hey, they're going to change their DNA at this rate, this many changes per generation. There are actual numbers in print regarding these types of predictions. We're just waiting to test them. This is something that we can go and test, like I've said. And the title of this debate is, do creationists make testable predictions? Well, at the end of the day, this was an easy win, because whether my opponent agreed or not.
Forgive me, I just realized that I don't know how long you went over 5 minutes. I just looked back at the clock and I realized it ran out. So I'll give you maybe another like 30 seconds if you can wrap it up. And,
yeah, let me just sum up this one prediction then. That's cool.
Thanks so much.
So this is just one then of the many testable predictions made by creation scientists. So we can discuss this one, of course, jumping into the discussion. I've got many more. I mean, at the end of the day, we could probably just end it here and call it a day, but why ruin all the fun? So let's get into not only this prediction, we can get into other predictions. If he wants to talk about something other than genetics, whether it's astronomy or geology, we've made accurate predictions in almost every scientific field. So the scientists won't look at it, and here's why. The big picture of it all that I'm trying to get to is the fact that we can literally read the history of civilization that's written in our DNA. And this is literally a head-to-head prediction that is testable for both evolutionists and creationists. And yet the evolutionists don't actually want to go and test this. And this is why. It's because they have a basic assumption that if evolution is true, history, as you know, goes back 200,000 years, right? The first modern humans, and then about 6 million years to the common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees. But if we actually think about the last 3,000 years, Tom, and the history of civilization, that's just the tail end of a long, long, long timeline, according to the evolutionists. So this is just a little time, a little blimp in the moment in time that you can hardly expect to see any type of genetic signal. But that's why we've made predictions that this genetic signal, if creation is true, should actually be detected. And we can actually look at events. Well, it's kind of technical. I don't want you to interrupt. You can give me what you think when I'm done it. But we can look at something recent in history, okay? For example,
what is his name? What is his name? Nathaniel Jensen is what you said?
Nathaniel Jensen, yes. So he's working on this right now. Dr. Robert Carter is working on this right now. But we can even look at something recent in history. For example, look at the sad history of the transatlantic slave trade, okay? Here we have millions of Africans forcibly moved against their wishes and moved to the New World. They are now forced to speak other languages than their own language. Essentially, they're speaking European languages, right? But yet genetically, we can clearly see they are African in origin, and obviously history confirms this, okay? So here's the question. How different are they from modern Africans? A piece of biological information that plays a very significant role in these predictions, Tom, and in this debate in general, which is what I'm kind of getting at, is the DNA clock, okay? Every generation, mistakes are added to our DNA sequence. the copying process, as you know, it's not perfect. It's imperfect, this process of genetic mistakes. Now, during the process of sperm and egg and the copying process, mistakes happen. I know you understand this, but if someone were to compare my DNA to my two kids, for example, we would see differences that are not found in either myself or my wife. Anyways, we can look back in time based on these genetic mistakes and based on genetic clocks. So we go back to history, and we know the transatlantic slave trade begins around 1500 AD. It's outlawed mid-1800s. From this point forward, the Africans that are brought over into the New World don't have much contact with Africa. They are separated for about 150 years, maybe a little more. This is numerous generations, Tom, for the African American clock to tick in the New World, independent of Africa. And in 150 plus years, several generations for the African clock to tick within Africa. And so African Americans and Africans have been getting much more different from one another for the last many years. We should be able to read and see that signal. And guess what? This is a prediction that can only be true under a creation model. And we are already seeing this genetic signal. These genetic markers are in our DNA. You can also see it in with the Genghis Khan Empire, the Roman Empire. This shouldn't be true if evolution is true, going back millions and millions of years. It should all just be a jumbled mess. So evolutionists can go and test this, but they won't, because they don't expect that signal to be there. Yet the signal is there. How do you explain that, Tom? And why don't you go make some predictions on it?
Okay, so I just Googled it. I just found about 24 scientists who've looked at this research, including P.Z. Myers, who have just proven you false. So yes, they have looked at it. They have tested it, and they've
no, they haven't looked at this signal. No, they haven't. They haven't tested this.
This is exactly what they're saying. They're saying they looked at every one of his data. They went through his lectures. They talked with him. They read his books, and they say his model is failed. So yes, they have looked at it. So when you said they aren't willing to look at it, that's completely false. Yes, they have. They've done it, just like I said they did, and they found it's inconsistent and doesn't make predictions. So the only ones
who have actually looked at it is Dr. Stefan Frello. There's been a very extensive written debate.
I just found one by P.Z. Myers. I just proved you false. You can find.
So what did P.Z. Myers say that actually apparently debunks or refutes his predictions in his work?
I don't have time to read through the many pages that I just found on
Google.
Because
I have. He hasn't looked at this. For one, the information that I'm talking about is going through peer review right now. So there's no way he's in the peer review process. I'll tell you that much.
Well, if it's going through peer review right now, then yes, he probably hasn't seen it, but he has looked at the books he's already published, as I said, and found no, it does not make predictions. So no, nothing Nathaniel has.
This data will go through the peer review process, and it will come out as a confirmed testable prediction. Okay, it's already confirmed, but you want to see it on paper in technical form. That is the topic of this debate. Do creationists make testable predictions? The answer is yes. Do they make novel, confirmed predictions? The answer is yes as well.
Who is winning the war? Creationists or evolutionists? Creationists are clearly on top. Creationists, as you are seeing, are making future testable predictions. And the testable predictions are not coming from the fossil record. Fossils are not passed on through sperm and egg. Traits are, genes are. We are using genetics to prove sufficiently that biblical creation is scientific and is the truth. The evolutionists may say that they too can detect the signal. And in theory, the evolutionists might try to look for the signal, but because the last 3,000 years of human history really only represent about 1% of the 250,000 to 300,000 years of human evolutionary history, it would be nearly impossible to distinguish signal from noise. The fact that we are detecting signal proves that biblical creation is the truth. We can test these head on, and it's creation that is coming out on top. The evolutionists may also say this is a creationist peer-reviewed journal, and that's no rebuttal at all. These are heavily peer-reviewed. These facts, this data is real, and the evolutionists will have no rebuttal. They have not had any rebuttal. Evolutionists have different starting points. Therefore, their methodology may be slightly different. But it doesn't matter if the atheists themselves will actually entertain this in an evolutionary bias peer-reviewed journal. The fact is, these predictions have been made, and the predictions are being fulfilled more and more every day. This is just the beginning.